to the Kiefer's Hot Rod Shop YouTube channel. I'm Nick Kiefer. Today we're going to check out the installation of these Tin Soldier Racecars suspension bracket plates. And also I want to thank y'all for watching and subscribing and liking these videos. Real excited to be up over 100 subscribers, and I can't wait to see the channel grow even more. So we'll start out taking a look at how I made these upper suspension mounting hoop pieces that go on either side here. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to try to notch the tube to meet this intersection of the main hoop cross member and the main hoop here. And I've got everything marked up. So this is my tube. I'm going to make that straight notch at this line. So this will be the center line of the intersection. So the notch will go into here for that cross tube going across. And then for the main hoop, I'm going to line it up with this line because it'll be at an angle which matches the angle between these rear frame rails and the main hoop lean back. And I'm going to try to make this partial notch first and then notch all the way through at an angle for the main hoop, because this one doesn't need to go all the way through, just on the inside. Alright, cool. So I'm set up for that partial notch, making room for the main hoop cross tube, number 15 bar right now. I'm gonna go about halfway into the tubing, but not quite, just enough to meet where the other notches will go. And then I'll set up for the notch for the main hoop. Alright, made the partial notch, and now I'm gonna set up for that full notch through for the main hoop. All set up for this notch. I've got it lined up 5/16 from the edge of this notch. Looking at it kind of from above, I calculated that since this will be at about a 21-22 degree angle, it'll go right through the center of that one at that distance at the edge. And then I've also leaned this 5 degrees to match the outward lean of the main hoop, where that's gonna end up. Wow, that's crazy looking. Let's see if it fits. Wow, it actually fits pretty decently. Nice. Cool. Pretty good. I was thinking I might have to clean up that inside notch a bit, and it seems like it, but lines up pretty decently. A little bit of cleanup, and this should be good to go. Nice. All right, that looks really sweet. One thing I had to do for this tube, since this curve had to be short, was actually switch to a 5.5 inch center line radius die. It's a 1 5/8 tube, and all my other 1 5/8 tubes, I've been bending with a 6.5 inch center line radius, just to make sure I don't squish it too flat, bending it tightly. But this JD squared die made a really nice bend, so I'm glad. That looks really good, but it just worked out better. Center line of this tube to that tube, that number 15 main hoop cross member there, is 5 9/16 inches. So this 5.5 inch center line radius just made sense. It gave me a 90 degree curve pretty much right up to the center line here, and just made it so much easier to line up the notches and all that. So turned out pretty sweet. Glad I had that die, and you just have to make the other ones and then stick some suspension brackets in here. All right, got the other side cut here. It's starting to fit pretty well. This side looks good, but I think I just need to trim the length on this end just a little bit, so it can slide in, move forward just a tiny little bit. All right. Did a couple iterations of shortening that up on the notcher. Got it all cleaned up, and looks like it's fitted in there pretty nicely. It's nice and level, so we'll final clean up, and this should be a nice little 3-piece hoop here. It's looking good. Alright, I gave it one more trim and went ahead and taped it in just to check out how it looks. It's pretty nice. So that's going to be sweet. Alright, I've got the suspension brackets and doublers all laid out from Tin Soldiers Racecars. Kind of coming up with a game plan with these. This line, it actually ended up being just a little long, but that is the center line of the tube that these kind of meet up to, those rear frame rails. And I also need to make a notch for those partial hoops that I just made, and that crossbar between those partial hoops that make up that 3-piece hoop. So it'll kind of partially just a little bit rest on that, and then it'll be notched to fit onto the tubing. I've actually kind of calculated the difference here. This is just kind of how it's going to sit on the tube, and I've kind of figured out how much I need to trim based off of the center line of the tube, how far down and the angle and all that. I need to sand everything to clean metal. I'll DA it, and then put these doublers on. There's the lower and upper that go on the outside on either side of each bracket. So that's a lot of heat going across here, because what happens is as you weld these on, you're welding just like the outside of this piece of metal, which heats it up and then shrinks it back further than it expands it. That's just generally how welding treats metal, if you will. So I think I'm going to preload it a little bit, and then I'll take it in heats, just weld a bit at a time, kind of alternating, doing what I can. But if I need to straighten it out, I will. And then the pairs are getting boxed with a little plate across the back, a little piece of flat stock. So you set it the right width for the heim joints to go into the rod ends. And then I'll probably also send pieces of tube through these holes in pairs, as well as that back boxing plate, just to kind of reinforce that C channel that it's going to be making by boxing these. First, just have a whole bunch of sanding and cleaning to do, and then I'll set them all up. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning these doublers up, and the plates also. I'm going to use a DA with some 180 on it, and just clean these up. It's a good idea to wipe these off with acetone or whatever cleaning solvent you like to use, just so it doesn't load the paper up too bad. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll even clean the sides all up, because those are going to be part of the weld, so I want them to be super clean. But I'm going to clean them all up and do the brackets, and then work on welding those doublers on. All right, cool. Got the surfaces DA'd, and now I think I'm going to use this locked out sander to go ahead and polish the edges up. All right, polish the edges up, and these are looking pretty good. Just need to get the edges of these cleaned up a little more. I DA'd them, but I want to go ahead and polish them. Alright, so I'm doing a bit of a dry run here with the suspension brackets, and this is how I'm thinking of setting them up when I weld the doublers on. So I've got just like some various like tabs in here that had 1/2-inch holes in them.
with bolts through both the tabs and these brackets. And I think if I clamp these together up here, that kind of curve that creates will help to counter the warpage from welding the doublers on. And of course I'll bolt those in with the with everything. All right, got everything cleaned up and bolted together, and here's the scheme I've come up with. So this and this hole are spaced with a couple of brackets, kind of like these. They're actually just a little bigger, but they're 1/8 of an inch. And these are this, and this hole are tightened just to kind of put a preload into these plates. Both here at the bottom for welding this one on, and then especially up here for welding these on. I've even kind of torqued them together in the middle here just to help this stay preloaded. I didn't want this to start bending out the other way, so I just tightened it until these were just touching. Tighten that bolt. So I'm going to weld it all up and see how it goes, and if I need to correct it with the hydraulic press or something just to kind of bend it back, then I'll do that, and just kind of make sure it ends up nice and straight. Alright, so I'm going to start welding these doublers on to the suspension bracket plates here. I'm going to start with just some fusion tacks kind of in key corners, and then I'm going to start working around these, flipping side to side just to kind of try to keep that heat even out and keep things from getting way too hot. Before I start tacking, one thing I did do is make sure that all these doublers are lined up with the holes in the plates, just so there's no overhang or misfitting. And one way to check that is to stick the shank of a 1/2 inch bolt or whatever size through and make sure that fits nicely. But let me tack this up, and then we'll check out the rest of the process. Alright, cool. Those are just to help keep things from moving around as I weld. Sometimes it'll shift the doublers a little bit, I've noticed, if I just start welding on an edge. And just to help kind of keep everything in place. So I'm going to flip it over, do the other side, then we'll start running some beads. Alright, let's run some beads. Go ahead and hit the other side. Alright, let that cool. I think what I want to do at this point is go ahead and switch over to this. That way I can spread the heat out. Another thing I've been thinking about is I was considering starting this from the opposite end just so I'm not concentrating heat in one place. But I think this will be nice as I come out from the center and then bring it back together. In my mind, that's just going to kind of help stabilize everything. So let me flip this over and start that other side. All right. Cool, brought it around. Now just seal up the other side and it'll be a complete pair of doubled up suspension bracket plates. Alright. Cool. Looking good. just gotta let them cool and unbolt them and see how they look, see how everything settled in with the heat. Here's one more look at kind of how they're set up before I take them apart. I noticed this is obviously warped here. Maybe on the other ones I'll put a little clamp at the end, but hopefully not too much. But real curious to see how it turned out. So I'll unbolt them in a little bit, and we'll check that out. All right, so I've got this little bolt just finger tight here, holding these up together, and it looks pretty good. This splayed out a little bit, but otherwise this remained pretty straight. So it did splay out a little bit up here too, but that's not bad. I'm not really seeing a lot more than like maybe a 1/16 of an inch, so if that. So I'm pretty happy with it. Look down the back, it's about the same. So that's pretty good. I think I might stick it in the press, maybe try to kind of straighten it out a tiny bit, but I think by the time I box it and set it all up with the tube through here and stuff, it'll be pretty good. And also, if it's splayed out here a little bit, you know, when you bolt the heim joint between these, it'll be nice to have a little space to slide in there and then bolt together. And then that's actually, wow, that's crazy how that's actually bent this way instead of out. That's nice. So that's going to be good. And again, you know, have a little space here to pinch together with the bolt. But looks pretty good. I'll probably do something really similar for the other pair. But glad to see it. Cool. All right, got the second set of brackets all cleaned up and paired up here. I'm clamping these together the same way, but just not quite as hard, just because I think with just a little bit less preload, I'll end up with some really straight brackets. I do want to clamp this side. I think I'm going to use this clamp to do that. Just kind of as I flip around and stuff, I'll make sure to keep that clamp. But lined all the holes up, and got everything clean, so it's time to weld it up. Cool. Got it all tacked up. Now I'm going to work on starting to weld this together. Once again, alternating sides and keeping everything balanced out. Alright, sweet. This one turned out pretty straight. It's nice to see it getting straight along there. And just going to need a minimal amount of tweaking to make sure it's good to go. Looking good. All welded up. 2 pair. Alright, so I'm working on straightening these plates out a little bit. And I've put a little heat to this one, just trying to straighten this part out and trying to kind of curve these, I guess, out but in, just straighten them, I guess, to say simply. They're cooling down right now. I just kind of wanted to see what I'd get using the oxyacetylene setup, but while that's cooling, I think I'm going to go ahead and stick this one on the press. It's really straight through here. I might tweak it just a little bit up there, but it's really straight for something like this. So My only big concern is this area, just because these kind of spread out. So I think I'm going to set these up in the press just to straighten them out. So we'll check that out. Alright, so here's how I have these set up in the press here. I've got this round piece pressing right on the part that needs to be bent, and the outside resting on these plates here. So I'm just going to push down in the center and see if I can just tweak both of these at the same time. I've got them stacked oppositely, so just right through where they need to be bent. Reason being, I just want to try to keep them even side to side, so I think this should help. But I'm gonna tweak them a bit, and we'll see how they look. All right, cool. Went at this with the press a little bit, and even fine-tuned it by just clamping it to the table and giving it some leverage. But it's nice and parallel. This has a little bit of opening, but that's fine. That'll be good for just when I put a little bit of extra space in there when I weld everything together. I put a little, like a 12 or 25 thousandths shim, depending on the setup, between my spacers when I weld everything together, just to add that little bit of space for paint and a little bit of room to install the heim joints, just so you're not shoving them in tightly and scratching paint, and it's just a pain in the butt. So I leave that little extra bit of space, and so the way this is curved will be nice for sliding that in there. And then when everything's bolted and clamped together tight, it'll straighten out so that these are perfectly straight when it's all bolted together, or very close to. So I'm happy with all that. Now it's just time to tweak this one a little more. It's pretty good throughout here. I just want to do that same thing in here where I kind of bend these in together. Got both pairs straightened out, looking pretty much the same. That same little gap on the bottom here, and then a little bit through the middle here. So I don't want to overwork it. I think that's going to be awesome. And next step is going to be cutting it. Alright, so I've got the brackets here, and what I've done is I've kind of measured, and using these calculations of how this is going to sit on the tube and my distances and all that from the center line of the tube. I know this is where I'm going to need to notch these for that 3-piece hoop that kind of connects the rear frame rails up with the main hoop and that number 15 main hoop cross member. But this is the outside of the cut, and then it's going to have to be beveled in at like a 52-degree angle, I think it is. Yeah, about 52 degrees. So what I'll probably do is just start with this one and just see how well it fits, and I'll kind of creep up on the measurements and all, just to make sure I'm going the right way, and then go ahead and move on to the other 3. But that's looking like my cut, and I just use this to make sure the angle's 13 degrees to match those rear frame rails. So, looking good, and I'll show you all the process as we go. Well, I'm about to use the cutoff wheel here to go ahead and trim this. I'm going to cut it here, and then probably just cut it straight across here, and use the die grinder to shape that radius. And also, this is something that I'm going to kind of probably sneak up on just to get this thing fit in perfectly. But I'm going to do that, and then angle this in the belt sander, and then see how this thing fits. All right, got it trimmed off, and trimmed that and rounded it with the drum sander there. Now I'm going to angle this in the belt sander. So I'll be using the discs sander side of this belt sander here. I've got it set up to the angle I need, and I'm just going to be sanding the inside down until it's right to the top cut there. And as you can see, there's a little Sharpie left on it and on the right edge there, so I'll be straightening that out too. But then otherwise, I'll just kind of test fit it back and forth into the car, and just try to creep up on getting it fit perfectly. So I'll show you how it fits after I do this. So I've angled it in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and check out how it fits. All right, so I've got it pretty much set up in here, but it's not sliding in quite as far as I need, so it needs to go in just a little bit, I guess. So I'm going to sneak up on it and the belt sander, actually disc sander there, and get it fit in. All right, cool. I've got this one mocked up in here. Got it taped in, pretty much set up in place, and it's looking good. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and just kind of trace the profile I ended up with on this one onto the other, make a pair, and then just make sure they're the right spacing apart, and then kind of carry on from there, do the other pair, and then just need to box these across the back there, and make the little tube for here and weld all that in. But looking pretty good. Might need a little fine tuning at the top, but I think I'm really close. So I want to wait till I have the its counterpart in here to do the final shaping on that, so that I can measure that distance between them accurately. All right, I got the plates all trimmed up and kind of mocked up in here. I'm just kind of holding them in by hand, and looking pretty good. Just need a little bit of final cleanup work. I've got the bracket plates all trimmed up, fit in here, and I've just been going back and forth, getting the top edges of them shaped to fit the upper, or actually just the main rear frame rails and that upper rear hoop there. It just kind of fits right below where the X joins the frame rail there. I'll probably end up clearancing that a little bit, because I will want to go ahead and weld that joint between the X and the frame rail before I put these in, just to make sure that everything's completely welded. But just been working on making sure everything fits nicely. It's looking good, and now I'm gonna kind of use these dimensions and start working on the pair for the other side. All right, here. Cool. Got the pair all fitted up for the passenger side here. Got the top and bottom, both sides fitting pretty nicely. I had to clearance it a bit for where the weld's going to go on the X here. That's something I'm going to have to do on both sides, but it's pretty much in place here. I think just a little bit of final cleanup. All right, cool. Got everything all cleaned up and laid out. Getting ready to set it all up with rod ends and stuff to set the width, and then gonna weld it up. I've got the boxing plate all tacked on. I started on like opposite corners on one side just to make sure it's positioned. Then did one corner and then started tacking in the middle, spreading it out, and then tacked it in quarters, just to make sure it's on straight and everything is tied in nicely while I weld it. But as you can see, I've got a nice V-trench groove in here, so that I get good penetration when I weld this, because these plates are 1/4 of an inch thick. They're really thick, so I want to get good penetration so it doesn't form cracks and so everything's nice and strong. But I'm gonna go ahead and start laying beads in there, and we'll check it out as I go through the process. So I've gone ahead and made this piece that'll go in here and link either side together. And I want to go ahead and just tack that in there to keep everything stable as I weld this boxing plate on. So I'm working on cleaning everything up for that. And then it's 65 thousandths wall, so it's a little over 1/16 of an inch thick. Chromoly. It's a 1-inch OD. A lot of the 1-inch stuff is 58 thousandths, but I had some 65 on hand for making drive shaft loops. So that'll give it just a little more heft and just be a touch easier to weld to this 1/4 inch, being just a little bit heavier. So that'll be nice, and I'll get that tacked in, and that should help stabilize everything, keep everything true. All right, I'm taking a break, letting this cool down. I tend to place it kind of neutral upright while it's cooling, just in case laying it on its side induces any kind of warpage. It's not really incredibly necessary, I don't think, but just something I like to do. But I'm most of the way through these welds, welding the V trenches, and I also have my little tube tacked in here to tie everything together. So just working on welding it up, and pretty soon it'll be ready to fit up in the car. All right, cool. Just making some final little fit up clearances, mostly to the back boxing plate here, but just getting it fit up to the car, and it's looking really cool. I want to make sure it's lined up in line with all this tubing here, make sure everything's actual and nice and strong, but it's looking really cool. All right, working on welding up the driver's side suspension plate boxed assembly here. I got the passenger one sitting here, and just getting them ready to fit up in the car. All right, looking good. I'll let this one cool down, and then I got a pair of these assemblies to stick in the Nova. Cool, I'm in the back of the Nova here. I've got all the welding joints all cleaned up that I need to finish up before I stick the outer parts of the upper suspension hoop in and those suspension bracket plates. So I'm gonna work on finishing all the welds where those sit, and also some that I can't get to very easily later after those parts are in. So I'm gonna zap those up, and then after that fit the outer hoop pieces and then stick the brackets in, and we'll check that out kind of as I go through the process. All right, got everything welded up and cleaned up. Got gas vent holes and everything. It's kind of hard to see them around these welds, but they're right there at the edge, and everything's cleaned up, including the pieces. So time to position them in here, give them a nice tack, check everything out, and then I will be partially welding them in where the suspension bracket plates go. So. Fits nicely in there. Really helps with tacking it in. I don't have to rely on a bunch of measurements and tape marks and marker marks and all that kind of stuff. Get a tack on there and see how it looks. what I'm doing is looking kind of down the plane of all the rear frame stuff, just making sure that this is level with this cross member here. And that's kind of the 1 degree of freedom it has. Alright, I'll kind of show y'all what I'm looking at here. I'm just looking down all of these tubes, making them into a plane, and just checking to make sure that's plane or two at the same time with that front cross member there, or the main hoop cross member. Looking good. I'm going to give it a few more tacks and then move on to the other side. This complex notch really helps this thing just kind of drop right in. I mean, when the notch matches up, it's pretty much in place. And I've done a little bit of cleanup just to fine tune it and all. But these pieces fit pretty nice, so just stick a tack on here and then make sure it's just right and stick another one on. Just want to get this lined up and tacked in. Alright, cool, that looks pretty good. Alright, cool. I'll show y'all on this side too. So, lining it up with everything, getting it in plane and looking across and making sure that those tubes are lined up. It's looking good. So, stick some more tacks in and start running a bead around here. Alright, I've completed welding these seams in on these outer hoops where the suspension bracket plates rest. So now it's time to make some final fitments on those and go ahead and tack them in here. Alright, got these all ready to go, cleaned up, wiped off. Got all the edges that get welded all cleaned up and beveled, and should be ready to weld up to the Nova chassis. Alright, well, I got everything cleaned up and marked for where the suspension bracket plates go. All the welds are completed where they weld in, and everything's ready to go, wiped down. So got them over here. I'm gonna go ahead and tack them in the car. Got the bracket plates tacked in, got them all lined up and looking good. I ended up putting some tape on here to mark where they needed to sit, and it was really helpful when I went to tack these in. When I put these in, I made sure to leave plenty of room for nut and wrench and all that. Here's a look at them from the back. Looking pretty cool. Just I want to tie them in with some reinforcement tubes, and obviously get them all welded in. They're just tacked now, and then I've got a few other things to do, some shock brackets and all sorts of accessories, and then I want to move forward with roof and A-pillar and door bars and all that, and
just keep building this thing onto the front and so on and so forth. But these are looking really sweet.
As an additional note, here are the Tim McCamus shock brackets that I got to use on the Nova, and I planned to use 1/2-inch upper and lower rear shock bolts, and these are 3/8. I was just going to drill them out to 1/2 inch, but then I realized that there's only almost 3/8 of an inch between the hole and the edge of the bracket as it is already. And SFI really wants to see the hole diameter distance from the edge of the hole to the edge of the bracket. Actually, the way they put it, they want to see from the very center of the hole 1.5 times the diameter of the hole to the edge of the bracket. But that's the same thing because that half diameter is the radius of the hole itself. So what I might end up doing is making a set of brackets very similar, but just either moving the hole inward and making it bigger, or maybe I might have to just make the whole bracket a little bit bigger. So that's another thing coming up that I want to show y'all. But just kind of the reason I haven't gotten to that yet, just trying to figure out exactly how I want to kind of tackle that detail. Well, I'm really excited about these suspension mounting brackets, and really stoked for this thing to be one step closer to completion. I want to thank you again for all your likes and subscriptions. Really stoked, and can't wait to do some more on this project. Coming up, of course, is shock brackets and anti-roll bar stuff, and plenty more to do on this thing. So hope you'll keep tuning in for this project, and once again, I really appreciate you watching. Thanks. See y'all again soon.